Hello everyone. For today's topic, we're going to learn about auditing framework for cloud computing, and we're going to define the role of third-party service provider in audit. To begin with, let's first break down the stuff that we're going to focus on. The topic includes auditing framework, identification management service, authentication and access management service. So we all know that cloud technology is been emerging these days. Have you ever wondered if it is still vulnerable? Based on research, the cons of cloud technology is security risks that includes malware infections and data breaches. Have you also imagined if the tons of data in cloud would be visible just for a day? Would it beat the number of population in this world? So that is how I think auditing framework for cloud computing must practice and execute well. So why do we audit framework for cloud computing? We need to audit because the use of cloud computing does pose risks to the enterprise. What is audit? Audit is essentially an assurance function that some standard, method, or practice is followed. Depending on the type of audit, the auditor systematically examines evidence for compliance to establish criteria. The risk should be understood and companies should assess the following before jumping into the cloud computing. Assessment includes privileged user access, regulatory compliance, data location ownership, data segregation, recovery, investigate support, long-term viability, IT general controls, unknown cloud services. So why it needs to have auditing frameworks for cloud computing? Cloud computing audits have become standard as users are realizing that risks exist since their data is being hosted by other organizations. To combat that, they are requesting different forms of cloud computing audits to gain assurance and lower the risk of their information being lost or hacked. Cloud computing audits comes in different forms. It depends on the needs of the enterprise and how it should it fulfill the audit requirements. So according to Halpert, the best practice in effective IT auditing is to start with the understanding of business functions, to identify which IT infrastructure is providing those functions, and to then consider the scope of the audit and controls best suited for that IT function. So auditing in cloud environment can be similar to IT auditing. The table shown in the right side are the categories in IT auditing. These categories can be also similar in auditing and cloud computing. So the categories includes factors of audit team, audit methodology and processes factors, client-controlled organizational factors, IT audit-controlled organizational factors, technical qualification factors of IT audit personnel, interpersonal and social factors of IT audit personnel, organizational environment and enterprise environmental factors, and system and target process factors. The difference of auditing in cloud environment to IT auditing is audit will be different for the cloud computing depending on the deployment model and the service model. The deployment model includes private, public, community, or hybrid, and the service model includes software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Control frameworks for cloud environment is provided to a seasoned organization or auditor in consideration of a variety of core control areas. So it is designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the following three categories. Number one, effectiveness and efficiency of operations. Number two, reliability of financial reporting. Number three, compliance with laws and regulations. Control frameworks for cloud computing consider the following compliance: COBIT, ITIL, ISO 2701, ISO 27001. So the COBIT, or also known as Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies, is a framework created by ISACA for information technology management and IT governance. The framework defines a set of generic processes for the management of IT, with each processes defined together with the process inputs and outputs, key processes activities, process objectives, performance measures, and an elementary maturity level. While ITL is formally known as Information Technology Infrastructure Library, is a set of detailed practices for IT activities such as IT Service Management or ITSM and IT Asset Management or ITAM that focus on aligning IT services with the needs of business. And lastly is the ISO. ISO is widely known providing requirements for an information security management or ISMS, though there are more than a dozen of standards. So these compliance are just only one of the examples in the control frameworks. Another approach of auditing is risk-based approach. So audit risk-based approach in cloud computing. It is a process auditing has become such more important as an auditor and must begin the audit planning by understanding the objectives of each business process and then determine whether these objectives have been incorporated into the client's processes while considering risks and internal controls. So according to Halpert, an auditor should be able to review the risk assessment product and observe the risk assessment process. Singleton proposed a risk-based approach that encouraged effective risk assessment and auditing for the identified risks. The very best internal audit functions are regarded as a catalyst for change, helping the organization through the difficulties of changing environments, cultures, and so on. So the risk-based approach includes five processes that includes service delivery risk, deployment risk, business model risk, security risk, and other risks. While on the other hand, Mohanty, Patnaik, and Mon propose the auditing aspects in cloud computing environment are discussed as follows. Auditing for regulation or compliance, auditing for risk and governance, auditing for security, database auditing, service level agreements auditing, third party storage auditing service provider. So why it involves third party service provider in audit? To continuously audit cloud service and multi-cloud, to continue monitor specific certification area, and to assure transparency, security, and reliable cloud. So the role of third-party service provider in audit, it assures the confidentiality, availability, and integrity of the outsourced data to preserve the privacy of their own data. It is capable of maintaining the privacy of user data and can be trusted as it may review the cloud database storage, reliability, and support of the cloud user upon request. So this diagram is an example that uses a third-party auditor. The third-party auditor here verifies the proof sent by the CSP and notifies the data owner when the verification fails. The TPA also generates the challenge and sends it to the cloud service provider. Identification Management Service or IMS. Identity management includes authenticating users and determining whether they're allowed to access particular system. ID management works hand in hand with identity access management system. Identity management is focused on authentication. Identity Management Service or IMS in cloud computing is the subsequent step of Identity and Access Management or IAM solutions. So the benefits of Identity Access Management benefits are as follows. It can better control your data storage. It can prevent unnecessary and risky access. It can detect insider and external threats. It can maintain data privacy compliance. So identity management in cloud computing is highly critical to your organization. So how IAM works or Identification Access Management. It is a directory or identity repository of the personal data the system uses to define individual users. It is a set of tools for adding, modifying, and deleting the data related to access lifecycle management. It is a system that regulates and enforces user access. It is an auditing and reporting system. So, what some IAM terms should I know? Access management, Active Directory, biometric authentication, credential, digital identity, password reset, and single sign-on. So these are some of the example of the terms in IAM. Authentication and Access Management Service. Authentication occurs whenever a user attempts to access your organization network downstream resources. The user must verify their identity before being granted entry for security. Entering credentials at a login prompt remains the most common authentication method. Authorization carries out the rest of an organization's identity and access management processes once the user has been authenticated. Users are granted authorizations according to the role at an organization. This practice is referred to as Role-Based Access Control or RBAC. So that's end my report about the auditing framework for cloud computing. Feel free to add other details that I haven't mentioned. Thank you.